All right, Cassandra, you're up. You're up next, unless anyone has any specific questions for Nikki from her.
All right, let's see. Share my screen to record. Yes. Apparently I have to grant permissions for recording. Hold on, let me do that.
That's interesting.
I would not be able to record the contents of my screen until I quit the app. Cool. So talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back. Really shows I don't use Zoom very often. We're a Blue Jeans company and a Google, weirdly a Google company, like open source. Okay. Optimize, can share computer sound. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Sweet. I can make it bigger too because I have a ginormous screen. So sometimes on screen share it looks really tiny. So just let me know if you need me to bump up anything.
Will do.
Cool. Okay, so this is our hub page, PatternFly Elements. Kind of started out so we have two different major websites at Red Hat. One is our marketing website where we talk about who is Red Hat, what do we sell, what do we do, et cetera, et cetera. The other, and that's redhat.com. The other is our customer portal. And the customer portal is kind of the one-stop shop for existing customers to go to find documentation, get help opening support cases, et cetera. And so the customer portal team, names that some folks might be familiar with, Kyle Buchanan and my husband, Michael Clayton, started playing with web components. And they're like, web components, this is pretty cool. It's a new technology. Let's, see if we can get some of this on the site. Originally called Relevance, but our flagship product is often like labeled in the community as Rel. And they didn't want the overlap because this is a different technology. So we renamed it PatternFly Elements. So that's kind of the history of the project, how we got started. A lot of us kind of saw what they were working on and we're like, oh, this is cool. Let's create a collaborative. And so multiple groups now at Red Hat internally who work on different websites have come together and are now contributing to this project. So it's definitely the epitome of what Red Hat represents, which is collaboration and teamwork and, kind of throwing ideas back and forth. What do you think about this? No, what about this? Yes, what about this? So we end up with a better project and a better product as a result. So anyways, PatternFly, this is the kind of landing page for us where it just has all of our documentation. But GitHub is where all the cool stuff is happening for us coders. So this is our GitHub under the PatternFly project. This is the parent project, PatternFly. And then this is us, PatternFly Elements. And you can see we've got 17 pull requests and 156 issues. We're hoping to trim some of those issues down. But we've got a lot of stuff going on right now. And a couple of big things we're playing with, like design tokens, for example. I've been kind of toying with what would our system look like if we converted to using design tokens. And then we have the preview site, which is Storybook, which is that same first page here, PatternFly Elements, and then just /demo. And you can kind of see what we have. Right now we have about a handful of components. A lot of things that you would need to build a marketing site, for example, like an accordion. We use a banded style of approach on .com. So if I go to redhat.com, you can see a lot of our content is striped. So here's this top band, then there's this band of content, this band of content, another one, and here's another one. So we use a very striped approach when we're building our site. So we call them bands. So that's what this is. And if I go to I love Storybook. It's really nice. You've got ways to add content and attributes. So do I want to customize my content? Yes, please. Header is hello hacks. Body. Ipsum. You can nest components. So this is gonna, that's good because it ends up in the URL, it's escaping it. So I can't put in nested components here for content, but you could, in each slot, you could put like a nested component, like a CTA component. So anyways, this is kind of a little like look into how we show off what we've got. All the different attributes you can choose from. Complement, that's pretty. Background images, etc. So you can go through the knobs. For components that have custom events that fire, so we use custom events as a way for our analytics especially, but also apps or other JavaScript could hook into them. But our analytics team can hook into the events as a means of tracking like, okay, this CTA was clicked, or this was clicked in the nav, or this event was fired. So if I click on accordion open, you can see this is firing an event here under actions that says accordion and a change event occurred. So then you can dig in and kind of see, what kind of event, what did it output, that kind of thing. So our analytics can hook into that, and they can say like, oh, this element fired a change event. So a user clicked on the accordion to open and engage with that content. So that content is performing well. And so we can kind of figure out if that's what we want to keep on our site, or if we want to move it maybe down lower or something like that.
Is that something that's baked into your base class, or like how do you make the decision that these elements are going to have this tracking thing?
It is. Well, the tracking is not baked in. That the tracking we pay Adobe for. We use Adobe Analytics for a lot of that, and we pay an external vendor to write a lot of the logic for that. They're called SDI. But we create hooks that they can optionally connect to, and it just makes their life a lot easier. Because what we found was actually, and this probably happens to a lot of folks, our analytics were tracking cited users only, right? They're only tracking click events. It's like, okay, that's great, but what if I tab to it and I hit enter? You get no data on that whatsoever, right? Like all they're tracking is mouse users. So one of the things that we did was we abstracted the events as custom events, and now each element fires an event and we can hook into that. And so, the accordion changed, meaning it opened or closed, but that can be done via mouse, but you can also, let's see if I can get it in context. Here we go. You can do it with the enter key as well, and that fires the event. Let me see. The up down arrows move you through them. Like you can really engage with it with your keyboard. And now our analytics is capturing all of that with one event instead of specifically looking for the click event. And now they don't have to write something else that's like, find the click event, find the mouse event. If they key up and they hit this button, if they key up and they hit this button, we bake that into the web component. They don't have to know what is considered good usability. They just have to know that something happened. And that's what we tell them. This one's really cool. My husband made this, but I also really like it. This is icon. So a lot of us, when we're using icons on the site, we either copy and paste an SVG, or we point to an SVG file, or we upload a bunch of sprites, or we upload everything we could possibly need on a page under the sun. When you're building a design system, like you don't know what your user is going to need when they're building, but you might have 200, 300 icons to choose from. What my husband built was this icon web component, which actually you pointed at a location, and when you ask for the icon, it loads the SVG for you. So pretty cool, very efficient. You're not loading everything under the sun. You have access to everything under the sun, but you can just start to kind of, you can see like we have a million and one things. Like how often do you need to load the restrooms icon on your marketing site, right? Like probably never, but maybe once, I don't know. But if you wanted it, you could get it without having to load it everywhere all the time. That's cool. This one's fun. This is a component that Kyle wrote that converts Markdown into HTML for you. with a really cool approach, because we do, we really value light DOM, because if you have JavaScript turned off, we still want you to get access to your content, even if it's not pretty, right? So one of the things that this does is you put your markdown in a div, and then what Kyle's web component does is pulls the markdown out, runs it through a library that converts markdown into HTML, and then hides the original content from the screen, and just, you know, makes that unavailable visually, and then renders a new element in the shadow DOM that has the new content. So your content is available. It's not actually gone from the DOM. You can still update it through JavaScript if you need to, but it's rendering through the shadow DOM for you. So it's kind of nice. You can kind of do it on the fly here. If I like change this, now it's an H2. Can do align rule, foo, var. So you can see like it's just updating it on the fly, and then all of this is just going into the div. So this is all shadow DOM. If I inspect, you'll see. Oh, I take it back. It's not shadow DOM. It's actually in the light DOM. He's injecting it into the light DOM. So that's cool.
So then it'll respond appropriately to your global styles, I would assume. Nice.
Yeah. Super cool. So I've been playing a lot with the card lately. So this is one of my favorites. This is my little baby. Got these cards. They have headings and padding. You can play with that. Got a little call to action. I created this image option where you can overflow your image. So you can do like, I want it to overflow the top and the side, so then it fills your card a little better. And all you have to do to accomplish that on your image tag is add this overflow attribute and tell it where you want to overflow, basically. Some things aren't logical, so they won't work. So like if you did bottom, but your image is at the top, it's going to look weird because it's not going to overflow the bottom of the card if you have content underneath it. But if the image is at the bottom of the card, it works really nicely. So here you can see it kind of overflows on the bottom, or just the sides, but not the top. So that's really fun. Got a lot of things. Modal, my coworker Chris made this. It's so beautiful. It's based off of the PatternFly modal. The slot for the trigger is unstyled, so you can put whatever you want in there. You could use another web component to render what the button would look like, or if you have just like text, sometimes, you know, when you've got like boiler text and it's like, oh, do you want to read more about this legal whatever, here, click this tiny little link we don't want you to see. So you can just make it a link in line, and make that the slot, and then the rest of the content would go here. You can also trigger it separately, so you could have the modal somewhere else in your DOM, and then your trigger, you would just need to connect them with JavaScript, but you could connect an external trigger really easily to the web component, which is kind of nice. But all of our documentation kind of talks about that, what kind of APIs there are. So like you can do this .open if your this context is this web component. You could do PFE modal.close. You can manage all of that from your app without having to like do anything fancy in the web component. The web component has hooks for all of that, which is really nice. So yeah, those are what we have so far. Those are like the top ones. We've got a couple of other little ones, and there's a couple of things that are in the pipeline right now. Like in our pull request, you can see like I'm building this chip component, which is just a little tiny, usually you'll see it in filters, you know, you'll have little chips in the filters that tell you what you've already filtered on, and you can kind of clear them out as you go. So I'm working on that. And our goal is to go through, oops, sorry, hit a button. Our goal is to go through the PatternFly proper project and convert as much as possible to web components. So if I go to patternfly.org, you can go to their documentation and see what they have, and it's pretty good chance that under components we'll be creating these in the next year, going through and making sure all of these are in sync with each other.
So will the React components still exist, or are they going to just be containers for these web components?
I have no control over that project whatsoever. If it was my world, everything would be web components. I'm the web components girl, but I'm not on that team. So
Gotcha.
we're open sourcing it and collaborating and working together. But
Cool.
But yeah, I'm not necessarily part of the decision making over there. So I don't know what's going to happen with the React. We'll probably keep going, I would guess, because quite a few of our applications use React to build their UI. React works well. Like, you can use these web components inside React, which is nice, and then you don't have to write any custom JavaScript, which is also nice.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah, Nikki, we should look at the way the way they did that modal. Well, yeah, the storybook part for sure, but
yeah, the modal, the markdown, all of that.
Chris did a good job with that.
I need to sleep even less than I'm already sleeping, and need multiple versions of me so that I can take all these ideas and do stuff with them.
Oh, you'll love this, Nikki. So from an accessibility standpoint, right? So when you open the modal, obviously your focus state goes to the modal.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can tab inside the modal, right? So I'm like, oh, here's the CTA. Here we go. Here's my CTA. And then you're like, well, that's the only link that's in here. What next? So if I hit tab again, now you're at the close icon.
Nice.
And then if you're done, you're like, well, I don't want to exit yet. What was in this modal again? Oh, back to the modal context. And back down to the CTA. So it kind of loops you around in the modal until you're ready to exit.
Nice.
and that is certainly an advantage of Light DOM, because we ran into issues with Shadow DOM with the way we were doing modals, specifically on that issue.
Yeah.
So I had an element so we do have, Nikki made a modal, and it works at least in a slightly similar way, as far as she has what's it called, Nikki? It's called like simple modal template or something?
Yeah. Anything simple means it was a lot of work for me to make it simple for somebody else.
The somebody else is always me too. That's why I really like them.
But I'm a mom. I like to put up like training wheels and bumpers and baby gates. Brian needs baby gates.
I need a lot of gates. But what I found was, so when we were working with a group that I was helping them, and they won't say who they are. So then you'll know who they are. But the modal would pop up, and then I had an element in there, and I was like, oh, well, this will make it easier. We'll do all the work in that element, and it'll be style scope because of Shadow. This is sweet. But that element, because all of the links were in Shadow DOM, when it popped up in the modal, it wouldn't actually find any of the links to let you tab through. And I had to do a heck of a bunch of weird work to make it understand. I basically had to break the shadow root of the elements that were in that modal. But it was the modal was the first time I ran into a situation where I was like, great, those PatternFly people were right.
Redoing fields did it for me with the Light DOM. Well, there was that, and somebody talking about SEO, and since we deal with online courses, it doesn't always come up for us because some of our courses
Nikki's falling off the face.
Brian's kind of like, oh no, you have to be able to hear me. I have a story. But yeah, the kids book Give a Moose a Muffin, where you give one thing and then somebody wants something else. Well, Brian made me put those tabs into Eco and the accordions and all of that. But then you had like nested Shadow DOM inside Shadow DOM inside Shadow DOM, which made things a pain in the butt. Yeah, I'm filtering myself. to try to style and to try to deal with all the events that were bubbling up. And so I had that epiphany, and the stuff that I'm doing now is trying to keep the fields in Light DOM. That's my story.
I definitely like it. I'm not gonna lie. Obviously, we talk about this a lot in our project about like the benefits of Light DOM and why. I mean, we run into obviously a lot of challenges doing Light DOM too, but I think it's worth it in the long run, and it does make some interactions a lot easier, and it makes some things a lot harder. So, I mean, I think it's 50-50, and it really comes down to your project and whether or not the content. Well, whether or not you have you're likely to have JavaScript users, or if your app is even useful without JavaScript. Like some of our apps, it doesn't make any sense because you can't query the database or do anything like that without, having your JavaScript turned on the way that they're written. And so they don't really care about Shadow DOM or Light DOM. But for .com, we just felt like it's a marketing site, it's all content. So it would be really great if I have JavaScript turned off, I can still get to all that content. And the same thing for Customer Portal. I mean, they've got a lot of documentation. We want to make sure that users can access documentation, whatever their system may be doing. Because it might be that like your internet is lagging and you're having a really tough time getting access to content in general. And so it's not even that you have JavaScript turned off, it's that like your JavaScript just won't load. So we want to make sure that they can still do what they need to do.
That was awesome as usual. It's fun watching like these two, we've got these two trains that are starting to have these like little overlaps and things and moving forward, and Nikki's making our stuff basically just look like whatever you're doing.
Just for reference, under normal circumstances, it's not good when two trains converge.
Yeah, no, you're right. These trains, like it's like the Musk tunnel. Like there's tunnels that go.
We're joining cars. We're just hooking up words, letters, and phrases.
We're zipper merging, which is what people should do.
Zipper merging, nice.